Good morning, everyone. Yes, some of us did sleep here last night, so we're here this morning. I'd like to open the first policy committee meeting of the new year. It is Wednesday, January 12th. I would like to call for an election of a committee chairperson. Do I have a nomination? Julie?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Tara Ockman.
Do I have a second? All right, Sarah Parent. Any other nominations? All in favor of that nomination? Tara, second. All opposed? Okay, Mr. Brown is abstaining. Okay, Tara Ockman. I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Now I gotta get this out.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Policy Committee meeting Wednesday, January 12th. Our next policy meeting is on the schedule. I don't have it in front of me. But we will make sure that's updated on the website. We'll start with proposed revisions to board policies, policy 1025, policy 1050, policy 1075, 1150, 1125, 1175, and 1275. We'll just take them in order of the memo that's outlined by Mrs. Sion and dated January 12th. Mrs. Sion.
So policy 1025, as I mentioned, is basically, it updates the legal references and reflects best practices with AEDs, which have changed significantly since this policy was put in effect, including the fact that we no longer have to register the devices with the state. And I did notice that there are a couple of typos there, which I'll clean up before the board meeting.
Okay, are there any questions on board policy 1025? I found some typos as well. You just want me to email you what I
That'd be
found?
great.
Yep. Okay, policy 1050, possession of deadly weapons and firearms. Mrs. Sion?
So again, we're updating some legal references and clarifying that deadly weapons are prohibited on school transportation, and the definition of peace officer, which is an exemption to the prohibition of deadly weapons, was updated by statute. So that's now reflected in the policy.
Okay, any questions on policy 1050? Mrs. Best?
Just a quick question, Mrs. Sion. I assume that a school-sponsored event would include any kind of field trip or offsite or any kind of activity not on school grounds?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brown? Oh, sorry. Anything further? Policy 1075, green cleaning programs.
So we updated this during and after COVID. So there are some updated legal references and then just some stylistic changes that Shimon was suggesting.
So everything, as I caught it, that we had already updated from COVID is in there, that if in need, we can. Okay.
Yep.
Just want to make sure I read that correctly. Any questions? Okay, policy 1125, pool safety plan.
So again, the legal references, and you can see that there was language initially that said for the school year commencing July 1st, 2014, those references have all been removed.
Questions?
So
Mrs.
we
Barrett?
don't have a pool. Does this pertain to the Y, or are we building a pool? Because I'm in favor of that, just on the record. Great, all right.
We're doing the policy first.
No, this is maintained for, this is for the
Because
Y.
a school pool is defined as any place where a school-related activity.
Thank you.
Other questions? Policy 1150, sexual offenders.
Okay, legal references and also the name of the Connecticut Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection has been updated.
Questions? Policy 1175, prohibition against smoking. Questions?
All right, so it expands the prohibition to any real property of any administrative building, and it updates vaping products so that it covers everything that's evolved over time.
Questions?
And again, this includes field trips, offsites.
Policy 1275, freedom of information and freedom of information request log.
So the only change here is the change from the word shall, from what the log will include, to the word may. So we have not been including the number of pages responsive to the request because the requests have started to become more in the normal course of business. This would give the superintendent the authority to start including those. We would not do this on a case-by-case basis, but during any period of time when things start to become overwhelming, and to be honest, we may be in one of those times now, we would start to provide that information for the board again. And in addition, even though it says that we will comply with FERPA, it sort of conflicts when it says the name and address of the requester. So it would, Dr. Adley, any superintendent, would have a discussion about whether the disclosure of a parent name would in fact violate FERPA. Because if a parent has a request that's not related to their child, perhaps we should be including that name.
Question? I just don't know why we wouldn't have shall and then perhaps have a separate list with may and break out the different items. It would be permissive versus required.
So this was Shipman and Goodwin's recommendation, was to do it that way. But if you would like to have the shalls, give me a list of the shalls and then the mays, then I can ask.
I mean, I would think everything with the page number should be shall. If there's a reason for name and address, which I just heard, that might be fine, but I would think everything else is shall. Potentially name and address is a may, and number of pages is a may.
So I had a similar feeling as Mr. Brown on this. I think that we need to be clear on what we are reporting. If FERPA protects a name, that is overriding to our local policy, so I'm fine with that. But I think we should separate out shall or may, or else I'm not sure what that log is. If it's kind of dealer's choice on what we report, we should be consistent in our reporting. So
Okay.
I
so
think
can go
maybe if
back.
we could put together a list of what we think shall, and then we'd have to bring that back to the board since it's a local policy, and then we can discuss. But I think there has to be some things consistent.
I mean, I think,
And some things like page numbers might not need to be, but
yeah, I think everything shall minus the name and address, if that's a FERPA issue or not. That would be my opinion.
I think we also need to get clear on what FERPA protects, so it's not a debate over a judgment call. I mean, yes, there are judgment calls and I trust the superintendent, but I would like to make sure children are protected if parents are looking for their information, but that doesn't mean all requests are related to students, and
Right.
therefore some people can be nameless and other people can't. This was kind of supposed to just be a tracking method for the board. So I think we should just be consistent, and I do think some things should appear, and we should probably have a conversation of what we think those things are. So maybe everyone could send me or Marge what they think, and then we could discuss it at the board level.
So then at the board level, we would present the policy in this form and then revise it because it takes 2 readings. Is that
Yeah,
how we would do it?
yeah. I think we should bring up the concern, let the board discuss, see if they agree with it, and move forward.
Can we do the work there and give a proposal? I mean, I would think we should have an open discussion as to who the 9 think should be what category. Like, should we go with what we think to propose to the board?
Sure. I mean, we can do that right now. I mean, I would hate to stall it out
Well,
another month.
I don't have to do it here right this second, but if you wanted people to amalgamate lists and everything, it just seems to drag 9 people into, should this one, that one seems like a little.
We can make a
inefficient use of the
recommendation.
Subcommittee.
Yeah, so I think you can email Marge and I. If anyone has a request now, then I think you can put it on the table. I certainly would say, I think that the whole point of this was to track how the district was with FERPA, and if we had FOIAs that seem to go above and beyond the normal course of order of things, that means names are important unless FERPA comes into play. So to me, name and address are essential unless it comes up against FERPA. So that's what I think shall be on the list. The may, in terms of page numbers, to me, I'm a little less interested in. But does anyone else have anything? And or you can just say you'll get back to us.
No, I mean, I think can we just present to the whole board that, I mean, it sounds like we're in agreement that name and address may be included, shall be included unless there's a FERPA issue.
Is there anything else? Okay.
I agree with
If
that.
anything changes between now and the board meeting, just email us. Policy 127, oh, sorry. Policy 1300, non-discrimination community. Mrs. Sion?
So there are quite a few changes there. I guess everyone can make a mistake because Shipman and Goodwin inadvertently included a prohibition against discrimination on the basis of genetic information, which only applies to employers and employees. So that's been removed since this is the community. We've added alienage, citizenship, changed the definition of veteran, and then the newer law, which prohibits the discrimination against community members on the basis of race, now includes certain hairstyles. There are procedures that have been updated, and the regulations make clear that complaints against the superintendent shall be filed with the board chair.
Questions? Mrs. Bast, you good?
I am good. Thank you.
And now the policy audit, Mrs. Sion. Where are we on that?
So in talking to Jessica Richmond-Smith, who's taking over for Gwen Zatoon, who's on leave of absence, many of the policies that are in the upcoming series, but let's just talk about this series 2000, which would be next. There's no corresponding Shipman and Goodwin Really? Well, there you go. There's the answer. There are no corresponding Shipman and Goodwin model policies. So I said to Jessica, if you were to review all of these, what would you say? She said, I would say to remove anything that's not legally required, because those policies may, from time to time, interfere with the efficient and effective operation of the board. So there are two potential pathways here. The first is if the board is wedded to these policies, Jessica will review all of them, make recommendations to update language, or if she really feels that they could impact the operation of the board, she'll suggest that we repeal it. What she suggested, in order to save both time and legal fees, is if the board looks at these policies and says, well, I really think that we need to have something, for example, about the superintendent's evaluation, then she would review that and update it. But something like the superintendent's contract, where it says that you'll give the superintendent a contract, you just don't need that policy. And when it said, for example, also the recruitment and appointment of the superintendent of schools, that's a duty that's delegated to you by statute. So somebody could pull up this policy and say, well, you didn't advertise in appropriate places. So those are the kinds of issues and landmines that she's thinking that some of these policies may present to you. So before we embarked on her reviewing all of these policies and spending money, we wanted to see which way you wanted to go forward.
Committee thoughts?
Just for clarification, this is probably something, all right, just for clarification, this is something that we're going to see as we go through these series. You know, this happens to be the administration one, 2000.
Because if you look on the policy, most of these come from 2008. So there's no real history at Shipman and Goodwin about where they came from.
So they came, yeah, that was a big policy here. I guess my question would be, we're talking about the FERPA log and that, well, that's going to be a localized policy. So how do you want to proceed? Do you want to take all of our local policies and look at them at a board first? I mean, I don't want to go revising policies that then we'll repeal.
Right.
Then I would say my suggestion would be we look at all of our local non-mandated policies here, make a recommendation to the board if we find that there's any that are outdated, like the fact that we issue the superintendent a contract. There's really no need for that policy.
Right.
Then take the few that we've distilled down and we put it out to the board. No one's looked at this till 2008. Here are our recommendations. Like the FOIA log policy is a 2018 policy, maybe 17, somewhere around there. And we might be able to stagger them.
So Jessica, I pointed out the FOIA log and she understood that was in response to a specific Darien issue. And so she had no problem looking at that and revising it. But some of these, she said, are ones that people pull out when it's convenient for them. And that's what she would like to avoid for the board.
That process makes sense to everyone?
Yeah, I think generally, I mean, I would think we don't want to have any policy that is against statute, but statute isn't always the end of what we do. We certainly can have within statute modifications as to how we want to operate. Just generally what most of these policies do, it's clarification or further information. But I think if there's things that just we don't use or create opportunities for confusion, we should certainly clean them up. But, you know, I think as long as I mean, there may be a statute which guides us, which we follow, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can't have further policy. But I think a review should take place, not just broom.
I think Mrs. Sion used the word landmine, and I think, I mean, it's important, I think, that we make sure that all of our policies are being actively used. And if there's anything there, that could be a potential landmine for someone to look at and say, you're not doing this. Well, if it's not required by statute and it's not something that we're actively using, I don't think we need it.
So I think both concepts are true, right? We can have policies that they're 2008 and we don't even, times have changed, so that's not even what we're doing locally anymore. We should be repealing them.
Right.
But we could have a policy that is how we operate, and we should reaffirm that, given that it's now 2021 and it was passed in 2008. So if we do this review, and maybe we start locally with us and we just see like we don't do it this way. And at this policy committee, we feel that this is outdated. We could recommend to the board, you need to look at this and maybe we should repeal this. And then we might have a smaller batch for the lawyers when we say, but these 10 are local policies. This is how we believe we should be operating locally. And could you please just go review these rather than wasting all the legal fees on all of them?
Yep.
Is everyone comfortable with that
Yes.
process?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, so we will get that on the schedule to do, because I think both, sometimes we do things locally and sometimes we have old policies. I know until we repealed them last spring, we had policies from 1977 and the world had just changed. You
Right.
no longer operated on onion skin anymore. So it did need to be in the policy.
So, Madam Chairman, would that look like, in this case, the 2000 series, us coming back at the next meeting with thoughts on these and then systematically going through them, or are we doing some of that in advance at the board committee, or just, do you want our recommendation on those and say, and then just take time at the table to actually review them, or?
I'd like to get them in advance. I'd like to get a recommendation so that we come here, we can do real
Okay,
work
all
and
right,
we're not looking at them
good,
for the
okay.
first time.
Good, okay.
Everyone comfortable with that process?
Yes.
We'll do our homework, we come here and we can have kind of a robust discussion on what we think works.
Sounds good.
Great.
On board.
Okay, is there any public comment?
Can I just ask a quick process question? So at the first meeting of the curriculum committee, we talked about a charge. Is that, I know that we're doing policy versus, and maybe adding in communication. This committee seems to be changing a little bit. Is that something we should be thinking about?
Yes, I think, sorry, go ahead.
So this morning is new to me, sitting in this particular chair. Not in being in a chair seat, but that I'd be sitting in this chair. So I will talk to the chair of the board and see what the board is looking for its committees. Any public comment?
I see no raised hands at this time.
Okay, can I entertain a motion to adjourn? Mrs.
Oh,
Parent
Miss-
so moves. Ms.